non-career. I hope the President will allow the report to be laid on the table. So I so submit.
Seconder, please. Senator James, Manager.
Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, James Ibiowo, Manager, Delta South. Mr. President, I rise to second the motion as moved by the Chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs that he be allowed to now read the report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that we receive and consider the report of our Committee on Foreign Affairs, say aye. Those against, any the ayes have it. You may let the report, Chairman. Chairman, please present the report.
Mr. President, my name again is Senator Muhammad Bukatua.
Chairman, you may summarize the report. You can go to the recommendations.
As Mr. President pleases, I will go straight to the recommendations of the committee. The committee has carefully and thoroughly screened the two nominees, and it is satisfied with their qualification, exposure, conduct, character, experience, and general performance. The nominees have displayed wide and in-depth knowledge of international diplomacy. Therefore, the committee recommends as follows: that the Senate do confirm the nomination of Ambassador Muhammad Haruna Manta for appointment as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And two, that the Senate do confirm the nomination of Yusuf Yunusa for appointment as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you, Mr. President. I so present.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Any comments? Leader of the Senate, we need to resolve into committee of the whole. The leader is on diplomatic mission.
On a diplomatic mission. Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to move the motion for the chair to go into committee of the whole in order for this distinguished chamber to consider the report. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate resolves into committee of the whole to consider the report of our Committee on Foreign Affairs, say aye. Those against, any the ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, we do approval. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Ambassador Muhammad Haruna Manta for appointment as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Yusuf Yunusa for appointment as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I rise to move a motion for the chair to resume plenary in order to report progress.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I second the motion that the chair return to plenary.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate reverse to plenary for the chair to report progress say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, the Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the Committee on Foreign Affairs on the screening of Mr. President's nominees for appointment as non-career ambassadors of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and approved the nominations of 1. Ambassador Muhammad Haruna Manta, Niger State, and 2. Yusuf Yunusa of Yobe State as non-career ambassadors of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Confirmation. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Ambassador Muhammad Haruna Manta for appointment as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Ambassador Muhammad Haruna Manta is hereby confirmed as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Yusuf Yunusa for appointment as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Yusuf Yunusa is hereby confirmed as non-career ambassador of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you very much. Congratulations to them.
Hello, Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues. The second order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the report of the Committee on Establishment and Public Service Matters on the screening of the following persons for appointment as Chairman, Director General, Executive Commissioners of the National Pension Commission as follows. 1. Dr. Oyinde Shola Oluremi Oni, Kwara, North Central, Chairman. Mrs. Aisha Dahib Umar, Adamawa, Northeast, Director General. Number 3, Mrs. Hannah Hanne Musa Katsina, Northwest, Commissioner. Number 4, Clement Oyedele Akintola, Ondo, Southwest, Commissioner. Number 5, Anyam C. Nyerere Abia, Southeast, Commissioner. And number 6, Charles F.A. Sylvester, Emu Kowate, Delta, South, Commissioner. The single senator will recall that the request of Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief, was referred to the committee on Wednesday, 30th September 2020. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Ibrahim Shekarau, Chairman of the committee, to move the motion for the presentation and consideration of the report. In his absence, I think his chairman, distinguished Senator Mpigi Barinada, is to represent him in presenting this report. I so move, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Leader. Distinguished Senator Mpigi Barinada.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. May I move that the Senate do receive and consider the report of the Committee on Establishment and Public Service Matters on the confirmation of the nomination of the following persons for appointment as Chairman, Director, General, Executive Commissioners of the National Pension Commission. 1. Dr. Yedosola Olowere Oni. 2. Aisha Jahasha Umar Adamawa, Northeast Director General. 3. Hannah Hani Musawa Katsina, Northwest Commissioner. 4. Clement Ayedele Akintola Ondo, Southwest Commissioner. 5. Ayinsi Ayere Abia, Southeast Commissioner. And 6. Charles Efe Sylvester Omokewele, Delta South Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, I so move that this report be laid before you.
Senator Kejab.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okejeb, I represent Benue Northwest. I stand to second the motion as moved, maybe with a little correction, minus the third one, number 3, as ably moved by Senator Mpigi. I so move.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate receives the report of our committee on establishment, say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Chairman, you may lay the report, please. Chairman, you may present the report. But maybe we need a summary of this report, probably the findings and the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues. According to the Committee on Establishment and Public Service, having thoroughly screened the nominees and been satisfied to their respective qualifications, that the Senate do confirm these persons. But one of the candidates that the Senate do approve the stepping down of the nomination of Hannatu Hani Musa from Katsina State, representing Northwest Zone, in view of the fact that she was unable to submit to the committee on-demand copy of mandatory NYSC discharge certificate as required under the provision of Section 12 of NYSC Act as amended, despite giving ample opportunity. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any seconder? Senator Abiodun Oju.
And to also add that on this list of 6, there were only 2 women, and one of them has been stepped down. I am craving the indulgence of this hallowed chamber to recognize the fact that there is a need for gender balance in all of these appointments, and there is only 1 woman left on the list of 5. So I'm asking that you take cognizance of it, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Abiodun Olujumi. I think the men are not on gender elimination series. I think you will have another time to speak to this as your observation. But let me also, before I put the question, maybe make a point about something the chairman said during the presentation, that we stand down the consideration or the confirmation of the nomination of Hannatu Musa Musawa because she's unable, he used the word unable, to provide her NYC certificate. I think she is still working to get her NYC certificate, because if you say it's unable, it's complete, it's conclusive. So if she brings it later, then we can confirm her, but now it has to be stood down until she brings it. Those in favor of the motion that we allow our committee on establishment. No, it's okay. Any comment on this? Yeah, Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Einaya Baribe. I represent Abia South. I recall, Mr. President, that when this nomination was made, I stood up here and said that I had some reservations about this nomination. And I went ahead, Mr. President, to write to the committee, giving the committee my reasons for my disagreement with this particular nomination, especially of the Director General of the Commission. And the committee chairman graciously, and I want to thank him for that, looked at what I wrote and sent a response to me. And in that response, he said, and I will quote, that section 21, 21(1) and 2 of the Pension Reform Act of 2014, which I relied on, is not applicable to the present situation on the ground that this is not an intermittent vacancy envisaged under those provisions. Rather, that this was a new governing board after the dissolution of the former board legally by Mr. President. And I want to comment on this particular response. Reason being that when the board, when the former Director General was removed, that is within the competence of the President. Nobody can doubt that the President can remove objects. For the President to also reappoint, that is also within his competence. So we're not doubting that. What we are doubting is the fact, like he has put in here, that the government, after removing the DG, found out that that section makes it imperative that another person from the same zone would be reappointed. And so, rather than do that, waited for 2 years so that the tenure of that board will expire, so that they will say the board has gone and we're doing a fresh thing. It's very, very strange to me, Mr. President, that we would say and use the law in this manner, where something that should come to one place, say, okay, because you don't want anybody from there to get it, you wait for a whole 2 years plus. And that is why we're so worried about this. And we're saying that we're not going to. We know that the president has the right to appoint who he wants, but appointing it within the law is what we're talking about. Within the law.
Please, Minority Leader, I think you can handle, okay, you have even sat down. Okay, so round up, please, round up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Therefore, we want this particular matter to be revisited by this Senate. This matter of the DG coming not to the particular zone it should go, but to another zone on the premise, and I repeat, on the premise that the tenure has expired. If the tenure has expired, why wouldn't they also go back to the same place?
And that is a very good point to land. Well, thank you very much, the minority leader. Let me say this. You would have been perfectly right. You would have been perfectly right if when the DG was removed 2 years ago, according to you, when the DG was removed and the board was in existence, and then somebody else from another part of the country, maybe from another geopolitical zone, the remaining 5, is presented. That would have been a perfect argument. But having gone this far, the board finished its tenure. For whatever reason, there was no replacement of the DG. Now, the question of replacement does not even arise. There's no basis for the question of somebody from that geopolitical zone of the former DG should come to, because the entire life of the board had finished. So I really, I can see your point, but there is no basis for this argument because it will fall flat on its face. Senator Andume.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, as a leader in this chamber, I've been listening to the argument of the minority leader. We have roles to play, we have leadership role to play, and that is very important. When situations like this comes up, we should use wisdom and the position we are occupying. I was expecting that the leader would have raised this matter when the former DG was removed and it took like 6 to 1 year without replacement. But now that the tenure has so expired, and it is quite unfortunate to impute any motive in terms of appointment. In the 5 appointments that are there, Northeast, Southeast is represented. In fact, if last time the DG was in Southeast and now it's in Northeast, where in this system both marginalized, you should be grateful that it's come to Northeast, not to Northwest or somewhere. So we are one in this. You should struggle later on for Northeast, but for you. Since let me land, Mr. President, protect me. When somebody from Northeast is appointed and has gone through this process, after the tenure of the first one has expired, it's just like opportunities come and we're sitting down here to represent our people. The president feels that this woman, who is very qualified to hold this position, having had that experience added, I think you should support it, and I think there is no need for us to this Senate is Nigerian Senate. It should not be, and more especially because
Senator Ndeme, you can round up. I'm sure you have made the point.
To my colleague, I appeal to my colleagues from the Southeast. They have stood their ground. It's okay. And I appeal to Mr. President, having very close contact with the president, please look for something for Southeast next time so that they will be compensated. Thank you.
Senator Sumata Adeyemi.
Mr. President, I just want to make one or two observations. I'm a member of the committee, but I got my invitation to attend the screening. I think, about 30 minutes to the time they finished. Unfortunately, the chairman is not here for me to register my displeasure. And I say this because...
It was tactical.
Tactical? Well, Mr. President, he said it was tactical. Well, I wouldn't know what that means, but of course I got the copy of the petition from the minority leader. And I want to say this, Mr. President, that I doubt if there's anyone who will doubt the fact that President Muhammadu Buhari is one of the few Nigerian leaders that showed commitment to national unity and stability. This is a man who fought in the Civil War to keep Nigeria one. So I do not think the president will want to be partisan. But again, let me say this, Mr. President. Of course, there's possibility of the president being misled or being given half information. I will summarize, Mr. President, by saying, based on what Senator Badibe have said, and based on your own argument, there is this principle of law that ubi jus, ubi remedium. In essence, let it be on record, and I stand to be quoted, that the Southeast, we deserve compensation. Maybe after this tenure, or whenever it happens. But to say that they don't have a case will not be fair to ourselves as statesmen. Again, it's not the fault of the president that the period after the person from the Southeast was allowed to lapse. Now, those who are around the president may probably be involved. Nemo Jews, Ninkazikos. Mr. President, I rest my case.
Well, before I call Senator Aisha to Dairu, let me say that we are here to ensure that there is equity, justice, and fairness in appointments. But this federal character thing, I think sometimes we misinterpret it. The federal character thing is not saying north and south. Even though geopolitical zones are not reflected constitutionally, but when someone is speaking from north central, another person is speaking from northeast, I think that's spread. The only thing is we need to ensure that next time when there will be an opportunity, let such opportunities move to other geopolitical zones. I will not be speaking here for the northeast, but I want to tell you that the northeast feels even more marginalized for a long time. It's only under this administration that we are getting some attention. So with that remark, let me call on the Senator representing Adamawa Central. Senator Aishatu.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. Aishat Dairo Ahmed Binani, Senator representing Adamawa Central. My distinguished colleagues, I would like to lend the voice of my sister who earlier said, please support gender. I really understood what distinguished Senator Abaribe said. But the truth of the matter, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, this chamber is guided by law, and the issue of this is how it's supposed to be done without some law to back it. I think we should always strictly adhere to the provisions of the law. Mr. President, yes, the section 21, subsection 2 spells out procedure for replacement of a vacancy, but only as guided by section 21, subsection 1A to H. There are factors that will lead to that before you apply that. So that said, in the event of a vacancy, the president shall appoint a replacement from the geopolitical zone of the immediate past member that vacated the office to complete the remaining tenure. Mr. President, if we look at the provisions refers to the condition outlined in section 21, subsection 1, which provide the basis for the vacancy due to the factors A to H. If you will permit me to read those factors, Mr. President, you will see that this nomination of this DG, this provision does not apply to it. Rather, we have section 106. We have section 106, subsection 4 of the Act 2014, which clearly spelled that, notwithstanding section 19, subsection 2A and section 26, subsection 2 and 4 of this Act, where the board of the commission is not yet reconstituted after 6 months of the dissolution of the last board, the President of the Federal Republic may appoint fit and proper persons with pension cognate experience to constitute the board at the first instance, subject to the confirmation by the Senate. Mr. President, the last board of PENCOM was dissolved in December 2015. We all witnessed December 2016, we witnessed December 2017, we witnessed December 2018, we witnessed December 2019. We are just 1 month to December 2020. Mr. President, even if we are not considering 2020, we have like 4 years that had gone past. So on the basis of that, the question of replacement as stipulated in section 21, subsection 2, does not even arise, but rather the appointment of a successor of a DG and board as provided for in section 171 of the Constitution, Federal Republic of Nigeria, which vests in powers to Mr. President to appoint persons to hold or act in certain offices and remove such persons. So, Mr. President, it's not the question of we already have laws and we are guided by these laws. So we must adhere to it. It's not a question of this is how it's supposed to be done, this is because of this marginalization or something. If there is need, if we want to forestall any future occurrence of this, then we have to go back to the laws and review them. Otherwise, there is no basis for what my leader just said. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I rise to move a motion for this distinguished chamber to resolve into the committee of the whole to consider this very, very important report.
Minority Leader, we are going to close session. And committee of the whole.
Okay. I reluctantly, very reluctantly, second the motion.
Thank you very much for being very generous. At least you have accepted. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion moved by the leader are very well and ably seconded by the minority leader that the Senate will go into committee of the whole to consider the report. Say aye. Those against any the ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, before we start the approval, let me just remind us of the recommendation, particularly that of the nomination of Hannatu Hannemu Samusawa. When I think we just stand down her nomination, her confirmation until she brings the NYC certificate. So we'll put the question on those 5 that have been screened and recommended for confirmation. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Dr. Oyinda Shola Oluremi Oni for appointment as chairman for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against any, the ayes have it. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Aisha Tahir Umar for appointment as Director General DG for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Clement Ayodele Akintola for appointment as Executive Commissioner for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Anyam C. Inyerere for appointment as Executive Commissioner for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Will the Senate approve the nomination of Charles F.A. Sylvester Omokowate for appointment as Executive Commissioner for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. DSP. This one there, you said aye loudly like that. Okay. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I move the motion for this distinguished chamber to revert to plenary to enable the chairman report progress. I so move.
Minority Leader.
I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, gladly this time around you gladly seconded. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion that the Senate reverts to plenary for the chair to report progress say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Distinguished colleagues, the Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the report of the Committee on Establishment and Public Service Matters on the screening of Mr. President's nominees for appointment as Chairman, Director General, and Executive Commissioners for the National Pension Commission and approved the nominations of 1. Dr. Ideshola Oloremi Oni, Kwara State, North Central Chairman; Aisha Tahir Umar, Adamawa State, Northeast Director General; Clement Ayodele Akintola, Ondo State Southwest Commissioner; Ayim C. Inyerere, Abia State Southeast Commissioner; Charles Sylvester Omohwate, Delta State South-South Commissioner, as Chairman, Director General, and Executive Commissioners for the National Pension Commission. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Thank you. Confirmation. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Dr. Oyinda Shola Oloremi Oni for appointment as Chairman for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Dr. Oyinda Shola Oloremi Oni is hereby confirmed as Chairman of the National Pension Commission. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Aisha Tahir Umar for appointment as Director General for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Aisha Tahir Umar is hereby confirmed as Director General of the National Pension Commission. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Clement Ayodele Akintola for appointment as Executive Commissioner for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Clement Ayodele Akintola is hereby confirmed as Executive Commissioner of the National Pension Commission. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Clement Anyam C. Inyerere for appointment as Executive Commissioner for the National Pension Commission? Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Anyam C. Inyerere is hereby confirmed as Executive Commissioner of the National Pension Commission. Will the Senate confirm the nomination of Charles F.A. Sylvester Mohate for appointment as Executive Commissioner for the National Pension Commission. Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Charles F. Sylvester Omohate is hereby confirmed as Executive Commissioner of the National Pension Commission. Well, congratulations to all of them. The National Pension Commission had been without this board for over 4 years, almost 5 years, and there is every need to ensure that this board swings into immediate action. There is almost 10 trillion in custody of PENCOM, and this is something that needs to be properly protected. These are funds meant for those who retired or those who are working at the moment but will retire to join those elder statesmen and, of course, people that would have spent the best part of their lives for this country. So there is need to ensure that these funds are protected. But it is also important that we're able, as a country, to utilize some parts of this huge reservoir of funds with the Pension Commission. Sometimes we should be able to reduce some of our borrowing by borrowing from PENCOM, because this is an international global best practice. Many countries take funds from their pension reserves and utilize them. But we must make sure that we only utilize such funds in a very safe and secure manner so that we don't put the monies in the wrong way. Thank you very much. Congratulations once again. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected...
Point of order, Senator Bamidele.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleague.
Point of order, Senator Bamidele.
Mr. President, I'm Michael Okwemi Bamidele. I represent Ekiti Central Senatorial District. I am coming on 2 points of order, Mr. President. One is Order 43 of our rules, which provides for personal explanation. And my second point of order is a constitutional point of order pursuant to Section 14, subsection 3 of our Constitution. Mr. President, I chose to come through personal explanation as a point of order because it is not my intention to generate any controversy. Order. And let it be said that I am a part and parcel of every decision that has been taken on the floor of this Senate, including today, and I fully align myself with it. But going further, Mr. President, I would like to be placed on record so that it does not appear to those who elected us to represent them here that our loyalty to Mr. President, our loyalty to our ruling party, our loyalty to you, Mr. President of the Senate, as someone that we believe will lead this 9th Senate, to a higher level, and you are doing well. But in order that members of public do not mistake all this loyalty, has been in conflict with our loyalty to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That's why I would like to be placed on record as raising a point of order to say that pursuant to Section 14.3 of our Constitution that establishes the principle of federal character, that this Senate please do resolve to encourage and further mandate Mr. President of the Senate, sir, that going further, when letters come asking us for confirmation of nominees by Mr. President, which he has the prerogative to do, that as the first among equals here, as our leader, that you are mandated to go through before we even see, before it is read, and advise Mr. President where it appears that the federal character known to our law, I'm speaking as a lawyer and as someone who knows the history of Nigeria, 6 geopolitical zones are not known to the Constitution. What is known to our law and our history as a nation is the law amalgamating the northern and southern protectorates of Nigeria. And each of these protectorates has 3 geopolitical zones by our convenient arrangement that we have today.
So, Mr. President, sir, that any time appointments are being made that will involve DG and chairman, DG as chief executive, chairman as chairman of board, or or chairman and executive secretary, that federal character be understood in the way it was intended by the makers of our law, the Constitution, our forefathers. And I think that be taken into consideration. That is my observation, Mr. President, and I so appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Bamidele. I don't think this is subject to debate, but let me say one thing. When the President writes to the Senate, he doesn't write to the President of the Senate, he writes to the Senate. And I'm not going to take a mandate that I don't have. I cannot sit in my office and say, well, this letter should go back because there is no federal character principle involved. It is available for senators when I read it to raise the issue. I'm sure it's safer for us. It's more constitutional that I do that because you are giving me some powers that I'm not supposed to have. So while I thank you very much for that offer, but I refuse to take the temptation. Thank you very much, Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, the third order of the day is the second reading of an executive bill standing in my name on the Petroleum Industry Bill 2020. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this distinguished chamber on Wednesday, 30th September 2020. Distinguished senators, Mr. President, with your permission, I move that the bill be read the second time.
Leader of the Senate, before you lead the debate, let us agree on how we go about it. How many minutes do we give each other? How many minutes? 3 minutes. The chief whip, 3 minutes. But the leader, of course, can have more than 3 minutes because he's leading the debate. And if the DSP decides to speak, he has a limitless limit. But of course, I'm sure he will not go limitless. So, Leader of the Senate.
Sir, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, it is my honor and privilege to lead the debate on the Petroleum Industry Bill 2020, herein called the bill. The first reading of the bill took place on the 30th day of September 2020. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, permit me to briefly provide the background, objectives, principles, and summary of the content of this bill on the basis of which we seek your support for the second reading. The background. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, we are all aware that oil and gas have been and will remain for many years to come Nigeria's most important non-renewable energy source, as it contributes over 90% of the country's foreign exchange earnings and about 80% of the recurrent and capital expenditure. The petroleum industry is therefore critical to the economic and social development of this country. While the government's vision and aspiration continues to target diversification of the economy, the petroleum industry remains the primary source of revenue to make that happen, and it will continue to sustain the country in the foreseeable future. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Nigeria currently has proven oil reserves, condensate reserves of about 37 billion barrels. It has a production capacity of about 2 million barrels of light sweet quality crude oil plus condensates per day. It is still the largest in Sub-Saharan Africa. Its natural gas reserves are substantial at about 203 trillion cubic feet, representing about 3% of the world's total. From this, Nigeria produces approximately 8 billion cubic feet of gas daily, of which some 50% goes for export, 37% for domestic use, while 13% is still flared. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Nigeria's oil and gas industry is currently governed by a legal framework comprising numerous laws and regulations, most of which have become outdated. The most important of these laws include the Petroleum Act, 1969, along with the various regulations made pursuant to it. Oil Pipelines Act, 1956. The Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Act, 1977. The Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contracts Act, 1993, and amended last year by the distinguished Senate. The Petroleum Profit Tax Act, enacted 1958. The Petroleum Product Pricing Regulatory Agency Establishment Act, 2003. Petroleum Technology Development Fund Act, 2004. Petroleum Equalization Fund Management Board, etc. Act, 2004. And the Associated Gas Reinjection Act, 1979. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, as most of you are aware, the Nigerian oil and gas industry is plagued by numerous problems, and the industry is in a state of much uncertainty and disorganization. Since 1990s, successive administrations have observed that the oil and gas industry is not operating at standards and level of efficiency expected of a 21st century oil and gas industry. The fact is that the industry can no longer meet the aspirations of government and key stakeholders, nor can it match the pace of development of the global oil and gas industry and market. The problems and challenges of the oil and gas industry since 1990, which are even more glaring today, include the following. A, inefficient commercial performance and poorly organized regulatory entities, comprising several agencies carrying out improperly segregated regulatory functions, which result in inefficiency, conflict of roles, and multiplicity of regulatory shocks. B, an upstream acreage management system featuring an inadequate licensing and leases administrative system, non-transparent acreage award process, traditionally susceptible to the whims of the government in power. C, a downstream and midstream sector that is leveled by product importation, product price regulation, inefficient product distribution system, inadequate infrastructure, vandalization of facilities, and poor fiscal regime for investment in gas processing and pipeline management. D, a lopsided, poorly structured, and outdated fiscal regime that does not support efficient revenue generation for government, fresh investment by companies, and the growth of competitiveness of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. Number E, a savings mechanism that lacks sufficient legal backing and robustness to withstand the volatility of the oil price and consequent revenues for development. In order to establish a proper legal framework to deal with the above stated inadequacies in the oil and gas sector, successive governments have attempted to reform the Nigerian oil and gas industry, beginning with the report of the Oil and Gas Sector Reform Implementation Committee and culminating in the Petroleum Industry Bill. Since 2008, when it was first introduced, the Petroleum Industry Bill has been in the works in one form or another. During the 6th, 7th, and 8th National Assembly, efforts were made to pass the bill, but these unfortunately were unsuccessful. The bill has failed to scale through legislative process due to several shortcomings, which include the following. A, lack of ownership. B, inability of the National Assembly to conclude the legislative process. C, National Assembly executive misalignment. D, concerns expressed by the oil companies and the investor community. E, excessive and diffuse ministerial powers. And D, erosion of presidential powers. The non-passage of PIB has had inimical impact. Nigeria has lost billions of dollars in terms of revenues from the industry. No doubt, the continuous stalling and delay in the passage of the bill has hampered the realization of huge investment opportunities, denying Nigeria the unique competitive position as an oil and gas leader in sub-Saharan Africa. Oil is a finite resource. Almost all countries are discovering it in one quantity or another. Technological changes are undermining its relevance in industry and commerce. So the earlier we resolve how to get the maximum benefits out of oil and our oil reserves, the better. Therefore, the objectives of the Petroleum Industry and Fiscal Bill are as follows. A, create efficient and effective governing institutions with clear and separate roles and to establish a framework for the creation of a commercially oriented and profit-driven national oil petroleum industry. B, to promote the exploration and exploitation of petroleum resources in Nigeria for the benefit of Nigerian people and in the efficient, effective, and sustainable development of the petroleum industry. C, promote the safe and efficient operation of the transportation and distribution infrastructure for the petroleum industry and the framework for developing third-party access arrangements to petroleum infrastructure. D, to promote competitive and liberalized downstream petroleum industry that promotes the processing of petroleum within Nigeria and the development of fuel and chemical industry. E, to create a conclusive business environment for operations in the petroleum industry that enhances peaceful and harmonious coexistence between licensees, lessees, and host communities by conferring direct social and economic benefits from petroleum operations on host communities. F, to ensure that petroleum operations are conducted in a manner that protects the health and safety of persons, property, and the environment. And G, to establish a fiscal framework that is forward-looking, progressive, and based on a simplified tax administration that encourages investment in Nigerian petroleum industry, balancing rewards and risks and enhancing revenues to the Federal Republic of Nigeria while ensuring a fair return to investors. The principles are three. Number one, to establish good governance, competitiveness, global best practices, and ease of doing business in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. The second principle is to ensure early revenues for government, simplicity of administration, equity and fairness, competitiveness and transparency. And the third objective is to provide for predictability, responsiveness, best practice, sustainability, and role clarity in the regulation and management of the industry. What is the structure of the bill? Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, this bill is divided into 5 chapters, each of which is further divided into parts. Chapter 1 deals with governance and institutions. While Chapter 2 deals with administration of upstream, midstream, and downstream. Chapter 3 deals with host community development, while Chapter 4 provides for petroleum industry fiscal framework. The last Chapter 5 covers miscellaneous provisions. The highlights of the bill, my distinguished colleagues, are as follows. A, Chapter 1 of the bill provides the industry governance framework. It redefines the powers and roles of the minister and provides for 2 independent regulators for the industry, one for upstream and the second for midstream and downstream. In addition, it makes provisions for the incorporation of NNPC Limited, which will be a profit-oriented commercial entity wholly owned by the government. It also provides for future commercial entities that may be created based on voluntary migration of joint ventures to incorporated joint ventures. B, Chapter 2 of the bill provides for the administration of the upstream, midstream, and downstream. The chapter contains provision for a more efficient acreage management system featuring competitive bid processes, relinquishment and drip or drop, redefined government participation, and the concept of significant crude oil and gas delivery obligations. It also provides for third-party access to facilities and pipelines, incentivized frontier exploration, and explicitly committed funding for decommissioning and environmental remediation. C, Chapter 3 of the bill encompasses provisions for the host community development that is founded on establishment of trusts for host communities and development funding through a percentage of the operating expenditure of oil companies. And D, Chapter 4 provides for a new fiscal regime that is based on the principles of neutrality, progressivity, flexibility, simplicity, and adaptability. The essential attributes of the fiscal framework include: 1, current revenues preserved for 18 months for stability and planning. 2, fiscal systems for flexibility, existing converging, and new. 3, dual tax structure, national hydrocarbon tax and company income tax. 4, dual royalty structure, royalty by volume and royalty by price. Number 5, amended deep offshore and inland basin preserve with redefinition. Number 6, non-associated and associated gas enjoys company income tax. 7, grandfathering associated gas framework agreement and other fiscal incentives, that is section 39 of the CETA. Number 8, voluntary converging provision with fiscal incentives. Number 9, less fiscal burden on frontier and inland basin acreages. And 10, reduce fiscal burden on marginal and small field operators or producers. And E, Chapter 5 of the bill covers miscellaneous provisions such as transfer of assets and liability to the new institutions, transfer of employees and conditions of service, movement of staff of the institutions, among others. What are the fiscal implications? They are as follows. 1, statutory requirement for financial implications. The Senate Standing Order 2015 as amended, paragraph 77, subsection 3, provides that a compendium of the background information and financial implications accompany every bill. In pursuit of this requirement, the financial implications of the Petroleum Industry Bill 2017 are stated as hereunder. 1, financial implications of the Petroleum Industry Bill 2020. The Petroleum Industry Bill 2026, among other things, to provide a legal and regulatory framework for the petroleum industry. The bill proposes to transmute the current commercial entity, that is, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, into an incorporated commercial company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. It also will transform the current Department of Petroleum Resources, that is DPR, the current Petroleum Equalization Fund Management Board, that is FEMM Management Board, MB, and the Petroleum Products Price Regulatory Agency into new institutions, that is the Commission and the Authority. These new entities shall be self-funding and will not rely on appropriation. Therefore, no funding will be required or appropriated by the National Assembly for these entities under the Petroleum Industry Bill. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, my distinguished colleagues, this bill proposes a new and adequate legal framework for the regulation of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. The bill collapses the multiple laws governing the industry into one holistic legislation for ease of doing business. The bill takes into cognizance the inadequacies of our current legal and regulatory regime and proposes a forward-looking robust framework that shows awareness of the realities of a post-COVID world and a post-COVID Nigeria. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I believe that the objectives and provisions of this bill are very laudable and will transform the Nigerian oil and gas industry and attract substantial investment into the industry at this critical time, such that such investments are required to stimulate growth of the industry with its concomitant effect on other sectors of the Nigerian economy. I therefore, my distinguished colleagues, urge you all to support the second reading of this bill, and it's committed to the Joint Committee on Petroleum and Gas Resources for detailed legislative consideration and further action. I thank you very much for giving me this, your valued attention. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Leader. Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Oje.
We need someone to keep the time.
No, not for the Chief Whip. I'm talking that nobody should keep the time.
Oh, okay.
Mr. President.
It appears everybody is afraid of your whip.
You are already taking my time. My name is Ojo Zokalo, representing Abia North. I want to join my colleagues to look properly into this PIB. It's even overdue. Other countries all over the world, nobody comes up to tamper with their crude oil. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco, you go to Brazil, Petrobras, you go to Malaysia, Petronas, you go even Venezuela, Fiscal. Have already done what we are trying to do. The bill is overdue. What I would like to urge my colleagues, this bill must have its own good side and its bad side. Because you see companies like Saudi Aramco, The net income of Saudi Aramco was about $111 billion. It's a private-owned company by governments. They have nothing. And our NNPC have already started well by what they are doing now, showing openness in importation of fuels, showing openness in daily sales of the fuel and all the rest of them. So if we concentrate on this bill, we have benefits. We are going to have community benefits, benefit of foreign investors, benefits of our government easing out, not to be talking about fuel shortages or this and that. The NNPC become an independent owned company by Nigerian government, which will be pursuing with other known companies. So I want to say, the taxes, well, we'll be very careful. We'll have to go back to statuses of all the companies operating in Nigeria today. We look at those who already enter into agreements, so we do not lose people who are working with us. For example, some people have made investments 7 years ago, and those investments have not been concluded. And you must not allow them to go into this new law. The law has to exempt some people. No, I can give you, not about me. I can give you an example of Total in Egina and other companies I can continue saying. This bill must also have something for Nigerians. No Nigerian company have done exploration in Nigeria. All the Nigerian companies say they are doing exploration. They don't do the exploration. They only went to buy assets owned by Shell. And those assets were overdue oil wells, which were led by major oil companies to go to deep offshore and so forth. And they bought it. And no Nigerian company have really entered into exploration. They are trying and trying and trying. We must give opportunity for Nigerian companies to be able to do exploration on their own. So I urge my colleagues, it's not a long speech-making day, but it's a day all of us must speak to our conscience. We must be realistic about this, about our nation. We are giving out everything we have. This is the finality of our oil industry to go 100% private. So we must not play by sentiments. We must not go to look at what benefits Nigeria alone we get. We must also give the foreigners, investors, like tax incentive and all the rest of them. You cannot just be selfish. If we are going to be selfish only about ourselves, we will not have investors. In few years' time, oil will be everywhere. We have oil everywhere in the world. Even from all the coast, from Calabar to Badagry to Gambia to Senegal, all of them are oil. So we must be very realistic.
You can now stand to
on what we
start to wind up, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to urge, thank you, Erelu. I want to urge my colleagues that this is not a bill we must be in a hurry, but this is a bill we should also be in a hurry to pass. We must not be totally in a hurry, but we also be in a hurry to pass it, because this bill has been in these chambers for over 20 years, and it's not good for us. Let us make history, the 9th Assembly. This bill has been here for over 20 years. Let us make history as a 9th Assembly and make sure, put a time frame that we must pass this bill for the benefit of Nigerians and foreign investors. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. DSP.
Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Omo Agege, Delta Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, let me begin by thanking you for the courtesy you just extended to me to speak.
Order.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin by thanking you for the courtesy you just extended to me to take as many minutes as I'm able to muster to speak to this.
I know you will not take more than 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I will not disappoint you. I won't take too much of the time. Mr. President, let me begin by saying that I was speaking with a colleague a friend and a major stakeholder in the Niger Delta a couple of days ago, and we're talking about this bill. And there was a comment he made. He said, DSP, we should rush this bill. It doesn't matter what's on the bill now. Let's just rush it and let it pass. And I asked him why. He said, there is no radical difference between this bill and the one that came in the 8th Senate, and also the one that came in the 7th Senate. And when we get to the third reading, we are doing clause by clause consideration. Those little issues where controversies might arise, we will address them at that point. But we should not hold this thing down. Mr. President, I agree with him, and I commend that to this Senate today. Mr. President, I have listened to the presentation of the leader of the Senate, the leader of government business, and I agree with everything that he said in that presentation. And for that reason, Mr. President, I rise to support that this bill be read the second time. But I don't say so, Mr. President. I just have a couple of issues I'd like to highlight. For those who will be doing this consideration in the committee level, I understand it's a joint committee. I believe about three or four committees. Mr. President, these issues are very, very crucial issues, very, very critical to the people of the Niger Delta. And my appeal is that at all times they should be guided during their deliberations. If they want to achieve one of the aims of this bill, which is to create that harmony in the relationship between the oil companies and the host communities. Mr. President, I'd like to first highlight the issue of the contribution of the settler companies, the oil companies, to the community development, the host community development trust. Mr. President, I'm a little bit taken aback because in the 8th Senate, when we considered this bill, the provision for the host community at that time was 10%. Was 10%. And eventually, it dropped to about 8% and 5%. But Mr. President, I'm a little bit taken aback. What I'm seeing here is 2.5% of the OPEX, that is the operational expenses of the settler company. Mr. President, this is inadequate. But Mr. President, I know the potential argument that will arise from this. They will say, oh, we want a very competitive industry. Mr. President, we all do. Clearly, we want the Nigerian oil sector to be competitive so that those investors, those foreign investors, will rather invest here than go to Ghana, go to Chad, and other places. We agree, Mr. President. But Mr. President, this could also be a win-win for us. We can achieve that, Mr. President, by also taking this to a level, a percentage that is acceptable to everybody, because you don't want to do something and then before you start anything, there's already serious agitation, you know, in the host communities. So, Mr. President, I'm going to propose that at the very minimum, at the very barest minimum, we should go back to that 5% of the OPEX of the settler companies. The OPEX means the operational expenses. And Mr. President, we've been told that the advantages to this, we lose nothing. The government of this country, we lose nothing by taking the 5%. That's very, very important. We lose nothing. The oil companies lose nothing because, Mr. President, this is tax deductible. It is tax deductible. And Mr. President, we're talking about the expenses, not the capital expense of the company. It's the operational expenses. Now, Mr. President, another reason why I'm actually pushing for this, I remember all the interactions we had between the GMD, the Minister of Petroleum, and the economic team with the leadership of the Senate when we were considering not just the budget, but during the revision of the 2020 budget as a result of the pandemic ravages. At the time, Mr. President, one of the biggest issues that was raised was the issue of the cost of production per barrel of oil. And the argument we were making then was that while in countries like Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, I think they were going for like about $8 to $10 per barrel, you know. But here, we were told at that time that there were some companies, especially the indigenous companies, who were actually pushing for about between $18 to $28 per barrel, you know. And that was why they were making the argument at the time that oil actually dropped to zero. Because if you're going to allow them $18 to $20 per barrel by way of cost of production, and the oil at the time had dropped to about $18, meaning that it was zero per barrel. I remember that was the argument we made at that time, Mr. President. But Mr. President, in the course of that interaction, we were told why the cost of that production was so high. And one of the main issues they raised, Mr. President, was this security concerns. Now, Mr. President, if this security challenge, if the obligation to now provide security for these oil companies is not given to the communities, they now become guarantors of the operations in those communities. Mr. President, that money be expended on that cost of production by barrel will no longer be expended by them. That is what we're now saying should not come to this development trust for the host community, part of it should not come here. And Mr. President, asking that this thing be moved from 2.5% to 5% is not unreasonable, especially considering that there's no loss to the federal government, neither would there be loss to the settler company, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, I am speaking now in the context of sources of funds. This appears to be the only source of funds, you know, for the host community development trust fund in this bill, as I see it. But, Mr. President, I'd like to point out that we still have the issue of gas flaring. And there's revenue from the penalty for that gas flaring. Now, Mr. President, going through the provisions of this bill, that penalty, the revenue from that penalty for the gas flaring is supposed to be paid into the Federation account. Mr. President, it is the host communities, it is we that are suffering the impact of that gas flaring. Mr. President, you came to my village at that time when I was burying my dad. Because of the time, you were not able to look at that area where I grew up. Mr. President, all we do there is fishing and agriculture. That is my area. But even before I was born, they've been flaring gas in that neighborhood. To the extent that if you go there today, there's nothing in that water. As a little boy, I used to fish, Mr. President. I had a pond, you know, in the stream by my house. Today, Mr. President, there's nothing there. You won't see any fish in that stream. It is the effect of the continuous gas flaring. Mr. President, if there's going to be penalty for this continuous gas flaring, it is only reasonable and fair that that penalty, the funds for that penalty, should be used to ameliorate our condition in that community and not be sent to a federation account, which will not be shared by everybody. Mr. President, I think this should be looked into. The committee should look into this. It's very, very, very crucial for us, Mr. President. And finally, Mr. President, let me also say, even with respect to that gas flaring penalty, I understand, I'm told that it is the regulatory framework that will determine the percentage of the penalty. Mr. President, we need to make this thing so stringent that there is no incentive whatsoever to actually flare gas for any reason. And Mr. President, the only way we can make that happen is if we make it very, very stringent. We should not give them the opportunity to say, okay, we can just flare and pay chicken change, Mr. President. You know, I would have preferred that one is inserted into this bill, but I've been told that it is best provided for in the regulatory framework and not in this very bill. Mr. President, I think we should take that into account. With these few remarks and these few comments, I once again support that this bill be read the second time and passed. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Very much. Senator Mahmoud Adam Alero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleague, Mohammed Adam Alero, representing Kebbi Central. Mr. President, let me start by first and foremost commending the Ninth Senate for taking the bull by the horn. This bill has defied passage in the 6th Senate, in the 7th Senate, and even in the 8th Senate. Today, we have just started the second reading of this bill. So I will commend all of us for initiating the passage of this bill into law. Mr. President, the passage of this bill is long overdue. Nigerians have been deprived of the benefits that will accrue as a result of the passage of this bill. Number one, Mr. President, once this bill is passed into law, it will generate a lot of employment. Right now, we have both local and foreign companies that have gotten licenses for the establishment of refineries. But due to the non-passage of this bill, they are unable to do that. Even those that have started the refineries, they are yet to finish. And they have even decided that if there is no complete deregulation, they will rather export whatever they refine to other countries than to sell it locally. So, Mr. President, the passage of this bill into law will generate not less than 50,000 employment per annum. There will be so many refineries that will come up. A lot of people will be employed. There will be poverty alleviation, and Nigeria will be better for it. Secondly, Mr. President, it will promote efficiency in the management of the petroleum industry. Mr. President, right now, the NNPC is saying that from 250,000 and 500,000 barrels every day is being stolen. They say it openly, and this is simply inefficiency in the management of oil industry in Nigeria. And they have already made buyers for this stolen crude oil, and there are banks that will pay the money anytime the crude oil is shipped to them. So a lot of money will accrue into the Federation account. Mr. President, not only this, the passage of this bill will make money available for government to develop education and also healthcare, because the excess money that is generated will be used in the social sector. I think even the IMF and the World Bank have suggested to Nigeria that, look, if you pass the petroleum industry bill, the amount of money that will come on will go into the social sector, education and health, which is very, very critical. And we are all living witnesses to what happened to us during the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, we are still in it. Our healthcare institutions are so dilapidated, are so ill-prepared to cope, with the pandemic. But I'm sure we have learned our lesson now. Once we pass this bill, a lot of money will come in, and it will be pumped into the healthcare sector and also in the educational sector. Mr. President, the bill is, as said by the leader, will consolidate all the existing regulations, all the existing laws. It will consolidate them into one bill, removing inconsistencies and irregularities, and also duplication. And this is good for the country and good for all of us. Mr. President, because of the time factor, I will commend this bill for second reading, and I will urge my colleague support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator George Thompson Sekibo, JP. CON.
Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, I am Senator George Thompson Sekibo, Commander of the Order of the Niger. Mr. President, we all know about this bill.
Chief Whip. Chief Whip. Somebody is on the floor. No, timekeeping, that's what I mean. Fresh.
All right. In the 6th Senate, 7th Senate, 8th Senate, 9th, and 9th Senate. Mr. President, we are going to make history with you. If we are able to fast-track this bill and then pass it into and send it to Villa for assent. I am sure with the spirit you have and with the spirit we have, it will not take a longer time for us to conclude on the bill. Now, we all know about petroleum industry. Petroleum as a lifeblood of the country. But we are also aware in the next 20, 30 years, it will be phasing out for some other fossil fuel. Now, the earlier we're able to extract and tap what we have, the better for the government, for the host communities. So I think it is coming at a point when we have to face it, so that we don't transfer it again to another session of the Senate, maybe to the 10th Senate. I have gone through it carefully and observed this. It established a very good framework that is commercially oriented and efficient in nature. It will promote transparency, accountability, governance, good governance, and management of the petroleum resources. It will yield more money for the country. The bill tried to create a conducive environment for all its businesses. This bill, for the first time, tried to consider futuristic approach for environmental remediation, even though it did not talk about the already devastated environment. Now, just one issue I have. 20, 30 years from now, there may not be, oil may be there, but the market may not be there because people are shifting. And in the next 25 years, about 60% of the operators might pull out for some other sources of fuel. So as a country, we need to think about diversification from now, so that we can build up from this point, in the next 20, 30 years, our solid minerals exploration or extraction will have been properly put together, agriculture will be doing well. We should be able to encourage industries and so on, and then we should be able to defray infrastructure deficit, such as electricity, good roads, and so on and so forth. Now, if we can achieve this one in the next 20 years, I believe that even when oil is not saleable in the market, and with all this one going on, the country can still survive. Few things I want to point out, and because they are point-based, allow me just to read them out. The first one is the interpretation of the word host community in the bill gives discretionary decision-making power to the settler, to the companies. It is therefore important that we consider clear guidelines on what specific assets, infrastructure, political, environmental, and geographical concern constitute a host community in line with relevant best practice. That is one. Two.
Time up.
You don't come over. The bill empowers the settlers to appoint from outside the oil-producing community, the board of trustee members, the management committee, and all other committees. I think that the host community should be taken into cognizance when doing these appointments. The other issue of 5%, the DSP has talking much on it. On the issue of the environment, the bill provides futuristic approach to environment, which is very good. But the issue is, each of these ones is domiciled either in the commission or in the authorities. And I think that will not necessarily cause a bureaucratic bottleneck. So maybe by regulation or whatever, they have to streamline how that is going to be properly taken care of. Now, I think that there must be a process of clearing the already devastated environment. It is very important because the environment is already devastated, like what the DSP said. Now, what they are trying to do now is to encourage stopping the continual devastation of the environment, which is different from what is already degraded. So I think that there must be somewhere in the bill, I don't know how it is going to be captured, that they should consider the already destroyed environment when operating the bill.
You will round up now.
Appointment and settlor by the settlers and all that. Most of the provisions are okay. And again, also on the environment area, which is not properly taken care of. With the exception of all these ones, and then the 2.5%, which is DSP has already elaborated on, I think that if this is improved, it will create the needed environment in the Niger Delta region for the settlers and the government to do a business. Thank you very much. 2.5 minutes.
Distinguished Senator Geshambasi, Cross River South.
Thank you, Mr. President. Geshambasi, Cross River South. Mr. President, let me first of all identify very fully with the lead debate, which was a completely and a thorough expose of the situation at hand. I also want to identify fully with the position of the Deputy Senate President on all issues, because I believe that his submission has touched on virtually all the issues in this bill. The Petroleum Industry Bill started its journey, I think, in 2009 in the 6th Assembly. And even though last year we almost brought the journey to an end, it did not come to an end. My prayer is that this year, this assembly, this 9th assembly, will finally bring a petroleum industry bill to this nation. Because the lack of a petroleum industry bill has cost us so much money. For over 10 years, there has been no investment in the oil and gas industry in this country. There has been no bid rounds, because bid rounds are bound to fail because of the lack of a petroleum industry bill. So the investments have not come. But in the 10 years, a funny thing has happened. Oil has been discovered all over Africa. If we had passed the PIB in 2009, there were very few oil and gas producing companies in Africa, countries in Africa. But today, in fact, somebody was telling me that there's a new discovery in somewhere in East Africa. So we have oil and gas producing companies, countries all over Africa. And so in submitting a petroleum industry bill, we now have to be conscious of the oil and gas environment in Africa. Mr. President, I'm happy that, they say better late than never. So I'm happy that finally we are hopefully going to have this bill. I think my opinion is that the petroleum industry bill, along with the local content laws that we have passed recently in the, I think, the 6th or 7th Assembly, are going to revolutionize the oil and gas sector in this country, because you're going to continue to have full participation of Nigerians in the main wealth-producing activity in our country. One of the key things in the petroleum industry bill is that it aims to domesticate the entire value chain of the oil and gas industry. So, for instance, it talks about, the bill talks about eventually refining the bulk of all the oil and gas that is produced in this country. I think this is a very welcome area that the bill addresses, because the idea that IOCs will continue to exploit the oil and gas in this country, and we will have very little local content participation, is one of one of the problems we have in the oil and gas industry. And so the idea that we want to domesticate the entire value chain of the oil and gas from exploitation all the way to refining and so on is a very welcome area of this bill. The other issue is the issue of the environment, which a lot of people have spoken about. One of the loopholes in the current laws that we have is the area of abandonment and decommissioning. The laws that we have allow loopholes for oil companies to exploit in terms of setting aside funds for the restoration of the environment. This new petroleum industry bill blocks that loophole. So the issue of abandonment and decommissioning is clearly addressed in this bill. And I think that if oil companies are forced, as in this bill, to set aside funds for the restoration of the environment, this is a new and welcome development. Under the current arrangement, they do not have to set aside funds. But that loophole is now blocked in this bill. Mr. President, I think those are the few comments that I have. And I just want to urge everybody in this chamber to pass this bill so that it goes for second reading and the eventual passage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. English. Senator Chukwuka Utazi, Enugu North.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you for permitting me to speak on this very, very important bill. Mr. President, looking around here, you see the interested parties that are left behind here. These people who are here are not for nothing. They are here because they understand the importance of this bill before the National Assembly. And I want to say, Mr. President, for me, as an expert in energy law practice, Mr. President, I want to say that I have followed this bill from conception to this present. The Oil and Gas Implementation Committee that started the whole process in the 90s, I was part and parcel of it. And I still have the original of this bill, that has gone through several mutations to what we have here today. Mr. President, we have moved in the course of all these things. We have moved with so many jargons in the industry. It's a partial privatization, deregulation, and liberalization. We have had all those things, saying one thing or the other that constituted motion without movement. But since we are here today, Mr. President, I want to say that one of the problems that had kept us where we are here is that we are not ready to face the international best practices. Now that we are back to this, and then we shall have shown the will to take the gauntlet, I will say that whatever thing we have to do here has to meet that expectation. If it does, you can say the difference between the oil industries that are in this country here. I'll give you an example. Shell companies. If you go to Shell BP and check what is happening in MPC, they are not the same because we are not ready to do what is expected. But I expect that this bill will take care of that. The other issue is the unbundling of NNPC. It's very, very important that we have to unbundle it. And I have seen what the leader has shown here by showing the segmentation of how the industry will look like. But I don't want to go and quarrel with the issues, how we have done that over time. My own concern is that let us be moving and get something done. What we couldn't do now, through successive amendment of the law, we can get it done. The other issue is that we must understand that the delayed passage of PIB is for a reason. Many operators don't want us to pass the PIB because they are profiting from it. But if we show courage like we did early this year, before we did the amendment of the process of the PSC Act, if we show courage to do what we did in the PSC Act, we are going to forestall those people. So, Mr. President, know that you have a challenge. The same way you came out the other time with your leadership, come strong on this, so that those people who are profiting from the lack of this bill will go and find other places to go. The other issue I want to talk about, this bill is very, very important, that we have to look at the headship of all heads of states. that each time they have any head of state, the first thing that person does is he says he's the Minister for Petroleum Industry. Mr. President, we have to ensure that this bill will forestall such exercise, because a president cannot do the job of a minister and then remain accountable.
Let me correct an impression. Distinguished.
Mr. President, I want to say that we have to look at this properly. The exercise where you have the Department of Petroleum Resources as a body inside the NNPC, and we'll try and look at it here, does not work. A regulatory body has to be outside the body. But what we have is that the Department of Petroleum Resources, today they pick you from PEF, tomorrow they pick you from a ministry, tomorrow from the, and they show you can't. And even the regulator does not have anything to work with. He works, uses the peripheral area of the people that is supposed to serve to now do their job. Mr. President, let us look at the regulator in this. If we get it, Mr. President, we'll be doing well. And then I want to also say,
I'm sure that will be the rounding up.
That this is a good job. By the time with these two committees, the two committees goes for retreat to look at the nitty-gritty of this, but through going through clause by clause, that will help us do the main job when we come back for third reading. We would have come back with something there, but most important is the political will to get this thing done and stop people who are profiting by non-passage of this bill to find other things to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. There is a list here. I have a list. Let me add Senator Betty. But let me correct an impression that the president cannot be, or a president cannot be, no, a president cannot be petroleum minister. Every minister works for the president on the basis of delegation of his job. So if the president chooses to be the minister of petroleum resources, it's within his powers. I don't think that is the issue. Anyway, it's all right. It's okay. Senator Degi Biyobara Kuma Remeo.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Degi Eremie. I represent Bayelsa East Senatorial District, and of course, the people of Oloibiri, where oil was first found, with the very first oil well that is dried. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I want to thank the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who is the Petroleum Resources Minister. I want to also thank the Honorable Minister of State's Petroleum, Chief Timothy Silva, for referring this bill back to the National Assembly. Because for us, for people like us, I thank God that I'm going to be part of the history of enacting the PIB law. Having said that, a lot of comments had been made about the importance of this bill, and one will not probably be repeating some of these comments that have been made. But I have always been an advocate of the philosophy that the industrialization of this country is in the hands of Nigerians. However, I also believe that as a developing country, we cannot do without foreign investments and foreign investors. The importance of this bill is to the extent that when it is passed eventually, it is going to restore investors' confidence. From experts' opinion, we have on record that about $15 billion is being lost in the industry because of lack of investors' confidence in the industry. So it is a good thing that the country is considering the petroleum industry bill, and for this 9th Senate to be part of this history. The Deputy Senate President had spoken as a major stakeholder in the Niger Delta region. And so I wouldn't want to repeat some of the issues that he had already presented. But for emphasis, let me say this. Now, when you transfer the responsibilities of securing, of protecting the oil facilities, pipelines, and other assets to host communities that don't have control over the security agencies, what are we expecting from them? It is a very Herculean task for ordinary people to protect oil facilities. And we are talking about 2.5% from cost of production. It doesn't make sense. It is ambiguous. How do you determine what is due a community that is producing oil and gas from cost of production? I would rather suggest or recommend that if the 2.5% eventually must stand, it has to be charged to the profit. It should be derived from the profit eventually. At the end of production, 2.5% should come from the profit to the host communities. But I think it is better that the 5% the DSP had proposed is accepted. Because as far as I'm concerned, it is very meager. It will not take anything away from us. This is the very source of the sustenance of the economy of this country. The stability and the continuous smooth production of oil and gas depends on this petroleum industry bill. And so I urge my colleagues to give their support to ensure that it is expeditiously passed. Now, I'm a senator that could be referred to as a senator that is wearing the shoe, and I know where it is pinching. Yes, sir. This point is very important about degradation of the environment. There are some oil facilities, particularly the Olebri oil well, that is already dried. We are not talking about environmental degradation, but the well is already dried and is not producing. The people of that environment are in abject poverty. They are in misery. So the bill should also recognize communities that are producing, that are no longer producing. It is important for reparation to be paid to communities like that. And it is in this process of enactment of this law that these communities can be considered.
You should round up, please.
But, there are other laws that we have. The NESRA law, the NOSRA law, that relates to regulation of the environment. The bill, I have looked at it, the bill is not making reference to such laws that are prevailing. And so I hope that when it gets to the committee stage, reference will be made to the environmental regulation laws of the country to be also recognized as part of this bill, to be recognized, so to speak, in this bill. Having said that, I will round up by saying that it is important for the host communities who are directly impacted by the environmental degradation and the health hazards suffering from terminal diseases like cancer and what?
I think I have to round up. Yeah. No, just round up.
Of the penalties to the government so that they will feel treated fairly, equitably, and justly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues, I have 12 names here. And I think we need to just speak within our 3 minutes so that we're able to, it's already 4 o'clock. So, Chief Whip, please keep the time. Senator James Obio, Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues.
351.
James Obio, Manager, Delta South. Mr. President, very unlucky that the timing has become very strict in my time. For obvious reasons, I don't want to argue that. Mr. President, this bill is very important, undoubtedly. And it has suffered a lot of setbacks. And the leader of the Senate highlighted on the reasons why the bill has not been able to see the light of day. And out of the very many reasons he gave, one of them, which the Deputy Senate President alluded to very clearly, it was telepathic about the host community. And of course, gas flaring. So many of the issues that I wanted to touch on, the Deputy Senate President very eloquently and effectively highlighted them and exhaustively remarked on them. Mr. President, this bill, as initiated by the Senate leader, is one bill that will restructure, repackage, reposition and revolutionize the oil and gas industry in this country. And in doing so, the benefits that will be accruable for passing of this particular bill are very, very obvious. So many of the speakers have alighted on them. I don't need to go through all those ones. But there are obvious concerns, so that this bill will not go, God forbid, the way of others. The obvious concerns are clearly carrying along the host communities that are bearing the burden of hosting not just the oil facilities, the human beings too, who are operators of the industry in that particular region. Yes, oil may be, maybe its relevance may not be as it used to be, but, and then even the quantity is also getting exhausted. But what about gas? It's the wealth of the future. And it is very, very fertile in that particular environment. So, Mr. President, when we are talking about this bill that is bringing together all the petroleum laws into one, we must be very conscious of what we do. And because this bill eventually, from your own pronouncement, will come to the committees of downstream, upstream, and gas, which I, by the grace of God through you, am heading, the details will tell the full story, because when you talk about the gas flaring itself has been pronounced illegal by a court of competent jurisdiction in Benin. That case was decided in 1985 between Jonah Bemre and SPDC, where the Federal High Court pronounced gas flaring as an illegal venture. But unfortunately, here is a country, and the case was not appealed against. Here is a country where even when the court has made a pronouncement, people don't obey the pronouncements of law. So, Mr. President, my respected colleagues, the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's will be done at the committee stage. And I urge that this is one bill that must never be rushed. This bill must never be rushed. A very exhaustive, what do you call it, public hearings, not only in Abuja, public hearings, before the people proper, so that we take an aggregate view of all that everybody is saying for us to get a bill and then eventually do the third reading and pass it. So that once we pass it and then is eventually assented to by Mr. President, the bill will now serve its purpose. For the bill to serve its purpose, this is one bill that must never be rushed. So, Mr. President, my other respected colleagues, I agree with all the submissions that have been made by previous speakers, and because the chief will be saying time up, unlike those who had the opportunity to speak before me, some people took even 15 minutes. But behold, this bill is coming to us. And since it is coming to us, by the grace of God, we will do the needful. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Senator, Deputy Chief Whip? No, it's okay. I can take you later. Finish what you are doing. Okay, take it easy.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I'm Ali Sabi Abdullahi. I represent the very good people of Niger North Senatorial District. I'm from Niger State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me align myself to the previous speakers. As it has been said, this bill is turning into be a native of this chamber. We have some natives here, and they share the same age. And I believe events in the past have taught us lessons, and drawing from those lessons, this ninth Senate, and indeed this ninth National Assembly, is very committed to making sure that we consign the non-passage of PIB into the history books. I'm convinced that we're going to pass this bill for the good of our people. And let me say that the various components of the bill clearly is going to lead to some very positive economic growth. And of course, lessons have been learned, especially now, like some speakers have said, like I think Dr. Gesha was talking about, almost every African country now becoming an oil-producing nation. But you see, there is this saying, Kamada wani bata wani. Certain people will want to be like you, but they won't be like you because they can't be you. Nigeria definitely has its own resources. And I think the oil industry in Nigeria is more experienced and more vast than most of these other countries. In fact, many of these countries come here to learn the rope. So I think Nigeria has a very, very commanding height and advantage. And definitely, allowing the passage of the PIB will add to that commanding height and give us an edge in terms of, the oil industry. It is noteworthy, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that this bill will definitely unbundle the very consolidated structure we have now to give more room for participation, to give more room for proper governance, introduce efficiency. And I think in doing so, there are some very interesting points that I would like to highlight, one or two. For example, there is a provision that allows that when we have some excess funds arising from the operations, the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Fund will definitely take that excess. Unlike in the past where those excess are being called excess crude, and at the end of the day, the excess crude is just being used to give some people excess flesh. I think this is something very major, I find very interesting, and so it gives me hope that, of course, we are doing the right thing. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the other point I would like to quickly add is the fact that the NNPC is going to be unbundled, like somebody has said, and they've given some possibility of even timelines. because transitional provisions are being made so that we're not just passing the bill. We are going to see some definite actions that will be taken based on certain timelines, just like we had for the electricity power sector. So I think when we definitely follow this through, we are going to have a redefined upstream licensing regime. We are going to have transparency in the bidding process. Right now, you don't even know what the bidding process looks like. But here, we are going to have a defined, definite bidding process that is transparent. And I think the other aspect which somebody raised, I think the chief whip was talking about those who are already invested. I think there is a very robust provision that allows voluntary conversion to allow you either come to par with what the present bill is going to provide, or you go through the timeline that you have. So I think that has been properly captured, my whip. The other aspect is the issue of drill or drop strategy, which will allow those who are holding some existing acreage to actually bring it into proper utilization or take advantage of the incentives that have been built in.
Okay, round up, please.
Environmental impact of production. There are very strict rules on environmental compliance as far as the PIB is concerned. Because what we need to put in place is to even ensure that in the first instance, you do not have process and procedures that will spill out, that will lead to so much massive environmental carnage before you begin to think about remediation. Remediation? So I think the bill has taken care of that. And if we minimize our footprint in terms of the degradation that the process brings, we will definitely not even have any need for this. I therefore commend my colleagues to support that this bill be read the second time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bello Mandia.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Bello Mandia. I represent Kasana South. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the leader has given us the background of this bill. We all know this is one bill that suffered the most setback in its legislative journey. This is one bill that has been presented to this National Assembly by 3 different presidents, and each time to a different assembly. Mr. President, if this bill was important 12 years ago when it was first presented here, it is even more urgent today. Mr. President, according to a former GMD of NNPC, who later became a Minister of State in the industry, in just 10 years, the country lost more than 60 billion in oil revenue. Within the same period, from 1998 to 2008, Nigeria crude reserves increased, in just 10 years. And Mr. President, from 1998 to 2008, there was an increase in the oil reserve. But from 2008 to date, there has not been any increase, simply because there has not been any major investment in the sector. Mr. President, with a law like this, I'm sure when the investors come in, we should be talking of having over 50 billion barrels in reserves and would have been able to be producing at least 3 billion barrels a day. Mr. President, this country is an oil province. With the right investment, we should be making more revenue from gas than we are making presently. Mr. President, because of the absence of this law, between 2009 and 2019 alone, This country spent more than $40 billion to import petroleum products. And we all know the huge drain on our oil reserve. Mr. President, the passage of this law is very important to our economy. And I hereby support that it should be read the second time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Albert Basiakpan.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished and respected colleagues, Mr. President, Senator Albert Basiakpan, Akwa Northeast. Mr. President, a lot has been said about this bill, so I won't repeat myself for the contributions or to reinforce the contributions my colleagues had already made. Mr. President, but one thing is certain, that this bill will be the most remarkable piece of legislation if eventually passed into law for our sector. Mr. President, just a few teasers. The oil and gas industry is on a global sunset, no doubt about that. And studies have also shown that never again will oil price hit $70 a barrel. Nigerian relevance on oil will lose its relevance in the next 20 to 25 years. For an oil and gas FID, if nothing is done in our country within the next 3 years in taking an FID, because an investor in the sector looks at 15 years to recoup his investment, then we are in trouble. And I also believe that, Mr. President, the international oil companies rules our industry, 95% in this country. And then upstream, almost all our reserve, 90% of our reserve now are in upstream. And then upstream adds about 1.1 million barrels to our production on a daily basis. So what we need to do now, Mr. President, as a country is to see how we can incentivize investment in the upstream. As a country, we've not experienced any investment in the oil and gas sector in the last 12 or 14 years. Even the LNG Train 7 that we just reached an FID, his commitment has actually been extended, waiting for what position we will take as a country on PIB. So the pressure is on us as a country. When Nigeria was so relevant in oil in the last 20 years, there was no oil found even in neighboring African countries. Now the investor has an alternative. So the onus is on us to see how we can, as a people, take advantage of these God-given resources. Mr. President, we must therefore look at ways and means on how we can equally consider and try and see how we can achieve a win-win situation where the investor makes money and the country also makes money and the interest of the country is equally protected. Mr. President, therefore I believe that we must be guided so that we do not prioritize too much of revenue generation for a country in the altar of future investment, because without the investment you can't even talk about the revenue. So I believe that this bill is the only way forward for the country. Mr. President, what an investor looks at is the cost of doing business in your country. It has been established that Nigeria's project is cost 65% higher than the global perspective. Even our OPEX, operating expense, in the oil and gas in Nigeria is higher by 47% over the global best practice. So we have a challenge, Mr. President, to see how we can, as a people, come to terms with the realities of the present time, that investor you're looking at, when he's looking at an investment basket, he's not looking at Nigeria alone, he's looking at other clients where he can put his money and get his money back. And the real essence of a lot of this, Mr. President, is clarity, such that an investor can actually project and say, how can I invest my money, and then how can that same money how can I recoup my money within a stipulated and projected time frame. So I believe very simply, Mr. President, that the PIB is one piece of legislation that we cannot afford not to pass within the shortest possible time. And I have no doubt in my mind, Mr. President, that with your leadership, that this will be a thing of the past once and for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Chief Whip. Chief, you yourself, why you are not stable. You needed to go to him to ask him to sit down. Okay. Senator Adiola. Chief will be ready.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleague. Let me join other colleagues in congratulating us, that is the executive and the National Assembly. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, for those who have been following the trend, the first time I came in encounter with this bill was while I was in the House of Reps. Then it was an executive-sponsored bill. We started the process. Along the line, it hit the brick wall. The second time was in 2015 as a senator. Then it was a private member-sponsored bill. We started the process, it hit the brick wall. Now, it is an executive bill, which is the third time, and it's before us. And the question we should ask ourselves, are we prepared this time around? Have we learned our lesson, both in 2011, in 2015, that give us a very sound footing to confront this almighty bill that is before us? It is my hope and my will and prayer that at the end of the day, we will sit in these chambers and pass this bill into law. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, as we have rightly said, we are only discussing the general principle of this bill. We are not going into the nitty-gritty of it, because if we start, even just a section of the nitty-gritty of this bill, that same controversy we are running away from can commence immediately. It is on that note that I will call on the committees that will be saddled with this responsibility to look into everything that is contained in that bill, from section 1 to the last, to analyze in details as to what and what will eventually form the report and eventual bill that will be passed into law. Mr. President, what we are about to do is to unbundle the NNPC, is to unbundle the almighty NNPC and liberalize the oil sector and give an average Nigerian who is willing to do genuine business in this sector and access to go into this sector. And you and I agree that it's not going to be easy. There are a lot of bottlenecks that will come along the way. But I want to be sure that the committees will be up to the task. Number one, what we are about to do is to bring back investors' confidence into the oil and gas sector. And by this action of ours this afternoon, in the process of committing this into a second reading, we have started the process. And there are a lot of issues, a lot of investors who want to invest in this sector, but for one reason or the other, they believe we are not prepared. But I think this time around we are prepared, and we have started the process to put back this investors' confidence that has been missing. Number two major issue is the fiscals as contained in this bill. The critical sector, one of the main critical sectors of this bill, the petroleum profit tax. I want to thank Mr. President, the National Assembly, when we had to make a major amendment into the current tax system as current we have it in the oil and gas sector. But this one major sector of the part of the bill that we should not take lightly at all. And I want to strongly believe that the Committee on Finance will play a critical role in this particular area, as this will form one of the fundamentals upon which the bill, when eventually came back and to be passed into law, will be duly considered. Because today, the oil and gas sector are all over the place complaining about the PPT, which is an integral part of this bill that we are considering. We are here for them, and I believe it is not too late to get the Committee on Finance involved in this regard.
You should be rounding up now.
is the ease of doing business, which we are about to set into motion. And that is one of the main goals of this particular administration. Aside this oil and gas PIB bill, it is the main objective of this administration to ensure that if you are interested in doing business in Nigeria, everything should be easy for you. And by this singular action of trying to pass this PIB bill into law, we have secured an ease of doing business in the oil and gas sector. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me say this, that in summary, that the benefit of this particular bill outweigh these benefits. But I want to draw a very strong caution that we will be following and will be working closely, independently, alongside with the committee, so that we don't have two contrasting reports. So every item that will be contained in this report must be with every sincerity of mind and purpose, so that at the end of the day, we can be on the same page when eventually we'll be passing this bill into law. I so submit.
Thank you very much. Senator Ibrahim Gobir. Senator Ibrahim Gobir.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Ibrahim Gobir. I rise, Your Excellency, I rise to support this very important bill because unbundling the NMPC certainly will go a long way in giving us the required things we want, particularly in this country. There are certain areas that I feel that is need we look at them. First is on the issue of powers of the minister and that of the commission. I think it is important we look at these powers and then find a way to solve them. Because commission is made of skilled and experienced people, while the minister may not be skilled in that particular area, and therefore there is going to be some conflict in some areas. I think there is need for the committee to look at that very clearly and then find out what to do. Then the second issue is on the 2.5% operating cost, which should be paid to the host community, and at the end of the day, it will be tax deductible. Those of us who have been in business, we know that is not good. You take the operating cost, and then at the end you deduct it. Because what is going to happen is that if you take the operating cost, assuming at the end of it you lose, then that means you will have further loss because of what you have paid. And then if you say it's tax deductible, what is happening is that you are going to take the money from the consolidated revenue fund because you are taking it from the gross. And if you do that, it is going to be a problem because the host community will now be a fourth tier of government from the state, federal, local government, and now you have the host community. So I think it is important we look at this issue very clearly. Then the issue of regulation, particularly in terms of upstream and downstream, there is need to properly spell out what to do. Because what we want is to have the refineries working, we have the exploration going on in every part of this country, and then the refineries will be working so that we go down, so that we can have all these lubricants and anything we want in this country. I think there is need we do that so that at the end of the day, things will work out fine. Then the issue of environmental degradation. I think there is need for this bill to take care of environmental degradation, because if we don't do that, it is going to affect our own community, and at the end, they will be in trouble. And I also concur with the Vice President, that is the Vice President of the Senate, Deputy President of the Senate, of what he said that the tax to be paid on flaring or the penalty, the payment of that penalty should go to the host community because they are the ones at the receiving end. So I actually support that idea. And I also support the 5% to be paid to the host community, but profit after tax, not from the operating cost. Thank you very much.
Senator Barojibrin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Barojibrin, representing North. Mr. President, I'm confident that we are going to break the jinx of not getting the PIB passed by the successive National Assembly before the 9th National Assembly. Despite the fact that this is an important, bill that will certainly create that legislation that will help in the governance of the oil and gas sector in this country. We all know that getting it passed will be a plus for us, a nation, because it will create that, it will give that picture to investors to come and invest in the oil and gas industry in this country. Because investors, as we speak, do not have that confidence. They are not given a picture where they can calculate very well the opportunities within the system, and as well as the risk and how to mitigate this risk in terms of coming in to invest in our oil and gas sector. Because the lack of set out and established legislation guiding the sector. Because without this legislation, of course, the picture will not be very, very clear to anyone that wants to invest in our oil and gas sector. Mr. President, it has a lot of opportunities when passed. A lot of opportunities for all, for investors and for the government as well. Because it will, as I said earlier, it will help the investors and then the government as well. Because the enhancement of that sector will further go to create revenues for government, so that we'll be able to harvest these revenues to develop our country. We know we have a lot that we need money to use for in this country. So I think it's something that we should support. I want to call on my colleagues that we should be able to break this jinx. It's doable and we must do it. Sorry, sir. We've been faced with the hard problem. The problem was there in terms of getting our budgets passed in a way that we could operate our budgetary system that will begin from January to December. But when people thought it was not going to be done. But when we came with the enthusiasm, with the determination to do it, we'll be able to do it, and it shall be sustained. So I think with the enthusiasm I've seen among the members of the National Assembly this time around, the will expressed by all and sundry, will be able to pass this bill in a way that we'll find a common ground amongst the players in the legislative process, so that we can really bring up a legislation that's going to be a plus for this country, that we are going to use to enhance our oil and gas sector and our economy at large. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I have just two comments to make. One, I'm referring to Article 5.2, highlights of provisions of the bill, where it is stated that in addition, that is the second sentence now, in addition, it makes provision for the incorporation of NMPC Limited, which will be a profit-oriented commercial entity wholly owned by government. First of all, my understanding, it could be, or it should be, a public limited liability company and not a private limited liability company. Secondly, profit-oriented commercial entity wholly owned by government. We have to run away from the present, practice whereby a second afterthought creation of NAPIMs. Now, if we say wholly owned by government, we know that the assets are basically the assets of the Federation. I don't think that it will be fair to other parts of the country for us to rely on what is the profit after everything has been taken care of. So I'm thinking that the shareholding of the wholly owned company by government should include other state governments or others in the spirit of cooperative federalism. Another comment is C, that is chapter 3 of the bill encompasses provision for host community development that is founded on the establishment of trust for host communities. So care should be taken here as to who will be the trustees of the host community. So it has to be clearly emphasized. So for now, these are my basic comments. And then how this act would actually relate with Land Use Act. So we have to be very careful, although at the point of public hearing, some expert will come and explain how it impinges on the rights of owners of land, under the Land Use Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Betty Apiafi. Senator Betty Apiafi. Senator Mohammed Sani Musa.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mohammed Sani Musa, representing Niger East Senatorial District. I think Mr. President have done very well in presenting to the National Assembly the PIB bill, which, if this bill is passed into law, will result in paradigm shift in the oil and gas sector of the Nigerian economy. What this will mean is that it's going to translate into several multiplier effects that will touch Nigerians. The area I've seen very much interesting in the bill is the area of the frontier exploration. With what they presented, I can see there will be a lot of unbundledness of the commission. The commission will be unbundled, and a regulatory commission, especially the upstream regulatory commission that will be established, will be in charge of promoting development, doing all the necessary research for the frontiers that are unassigned at this moment. And we have a lot of these frontier basins with so much hydrocarbon reserves that have not yet been adequately researched to know the extent of the economic value they can add to our economy. And then in the bill, there are some proposals that I think when the time comes, they need to look at them very well, especially the proposed 10% rent on petroleum prospecting licenses and petroleum mining leases in the areas of these frontiers. Being an area that requires a lot of research, a lot of studies to be made, I think it would not be out of place for a more less rent. Maybe instead of 10%, they should make it like 5% so that it will attract a lot of investors to come in and look at this business. The exploration of frontier bases should be well focused and given all the necessary support, because so many of them are there, and that will help the economy as well. But in general, when this is done and the sector is fully deregulated, I think the market forces will be able to determine and will be able to determine the prices, and thereby giving government a free hand to regulate. And in that case, even the Nigerian masses will agree that when the availability of these products are there, sooner or later, with the vast explorations that will be going on, the prices of these products will either come down or will be affordable to all. And I think with that, if we looked at wholesomely the bill, we will see that it's a bill that is very necessary for this economy. It's a bill that is very necessary not only to government, but to every Nigerian. Because today we are in a monolithic economy whereby we all believe that it's only the oil sector that will ginger other aspects, all other diversification efforts of the economy. So I so much believe that if we give this bill a chance to pass the second reading, Nigerians will accept it and we will eventually pass it and make it a law, and it will all be good for all of us as Nigerians. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed Sabanokudu.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, Mohammed Sabanokudu representing Jigawa. Mr. President, permit me to thank and appreciate President Mohammed Buhari for his determination to fix the Nigerian oil and gas sector. My distinguished colleagues, you will agree with me that for over 60 years of oil exploration and production, a massive inflow of rents occasioned by multiple periods of boom in Nigeria has not produced the desired developmental result. Not only have we failed to diversify the economy using oil revenues, we have even failed to develop the oil industry. This can be confirmed if one looks at the state of our refineries. The absence of an appropriate regulatory, legal, and physical frameworks to address the issue of the petroleum industry has, according to the Nigerian Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, cost the country in excess of 200 billion over the years. This forward-looking legislation will not only address this issue, but is also drafted with full consideration for damages caused by the recent pandemic, and specifically arranged to incentivize and encourage massive usage of gas in Nigeria. Mr. President, the challenges surrounding future usefulness of petroleum resources and the increased level of uncertainty on oil demand calls for greater concern. It is estimated that with evolving new energy technologies, fossil fuel may be less attractive in the next 20 years. These cheaper renewables include solar, biomass, gas, battery technology, Mr. President, cheaper storage capacity. You see batteries with longer life in vehicles, and even the vehicles being faster than fuel-powered cars. Recently, trials being made also for aircraft to go on renewable. There's green hydrogen, and then there's climate, tighter climate policies. By the year 2050, most European cities are going to be carbon-free. And it means that there's lower demand for oil. Mr. President, this new bill, it's very interesting. And it's very important for us as a Senate to really sit down and look at it seriously. There are red flags from our major partners, the international companies, and they are shifting their interest from oil projects towards gas and renewables. There is the weakening influence of OPEC in determining prices of petroleum products. And this is estimated that probably in the next couple of years, the oil prices will be hovering around $40 and $50. Mr. President, this beautiful bill before us has very, very important features, one of which in the acreage system in Nigeria. You see a Nigerian, a company being given oil license covering 100 or 200, up to 500 square kilometers. What they do, they just go to one corner, prospect, exploit, and then the remaining acreage is left unattended for years. Now this new bill is saying that you either exploit the remaining acreages allocated to you or you relinquish them so that other investors will now come in and invest and exploit. Now this is a very beautiful arrangement. And it means that there will be a lot of investment, a lot of job creation, and so forth. Mr. President, as it is today, there is any new investment in the upstream. None for the last couple of years. And a lot of countries are offering acreages, are inviting investors to go to them. In Nigeria, nothing is happening. There is no investment, nothing new is happening. This bill will open the door for investors to pour into Nigeria and to come and invest in the oil industry. Mr. President, as we all know, and we've heard from the leader, that this bill is going to establish a commission which is regulatory. Well, I believe that the objective and provisions of this bill are very laudable and will transform the Nigerian oil and gas industry to attract investment to this industry at this critical time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues, for the various contributions. Let me round up the debate on the PIB by congratulating the Senate for taking this long time to debate and complete the debate on the PIB, the Petroleum Industry Bill. Just like the Petroleum Production Sharing Contract that we passed the amendment last year, this bill should receive the same treatment, that is determination, focus, and the desire to reach to the end of the process. The PSC amendment will remain one of our legacies. We should cap it, make the PIB the icing on the cake. Let the PIB be one of our legacies as well. And because we have adopted a different approach this time around, as a result of our experiences in the past, it is looking possible that this bill will be passed after serious scrutiny and consideration by the National Assembly chambers, and the President will sign the bill into an act. So let's make it part of our legacy as a Senate, the Ninth Senate. And I want to take this opportunity to call on investors across the world. This National Assembly is determined to go all the way, and we have the credentials to prove that, to pass this bill. And therefore, there is in the horizon a legal framework that will regulate the petroleum industry in Nigeria. And like all of us here have said during our various interventions, we are not going to be selfish as a country. There must be investment first before we get any meaningful revenues like Senator Bassi Albert in his contribution mentioned. So we must ensure that this bill, this PIB, provides a win-win situation for both Nigeria and Nigerians and the investors in the oil industry in Nigeria. And because oil is almost everywhere now, we have a stiff competition all over. So we have to make our environment better and much more attractive to investors for them to not only remain here for those of them that are already here, but to relocate to Nigeria from other jurisdictions. And that takes a lot of work to balance the need for revenues by us as a country and the need to encourage investors to come and stay. The committee is a joint committee. The petroleum downstream, the lead committee, the petroleum upstream and gas. This joint committee has what it takes to accomplish this assignment. And we will give you sufficient time. Yes, we need to pass it in a haste, but we need to do proper scrutiny because this is one bill that is sensitive. If we make the wrong provisions as a consequence of our haste, it will backfire and boomerang and will be counterproductive. So we need to work very assiduously to ensure that we have a balanced document. And therefore, our joint committee will be given a very good time, really, to work on the bill. Hold your public hearings, do your consultations, engage with consultants sufficiently so that when you present your report, it will be a report that is rich, that is professionally put together, that the bill itself is a bill that is balanced and should stand the test of time. I believe that this is something that is not difficult to do because the PIB came into this National Assembly, or particularly the Senate, I think around 2009 or so, in the 6th Assembly. And of course, in 2009, from one version of PIB, we ended up with our 3 versions of PIB, and eventually all of them were shown out of the chambers of the National Assembly. They didn't pass. The same thing happened in 2011. The same thing happened in 2015. So, some of the bills passed through, but they did not meet the presidential assent. This time, we had a lot of engagements with the executive arm of government before this bill came. And we believe that this bill will receive all the attention it requires. Nobody is promising the executive that this bill will go back to them the way it came. We are going to be thorough, we are going to be meticulous, and we will ensure that whatever lives here is something that will be to the benefit of both our country and our people, on one hand, and the investors who are here and who may like to come here and stay to do business. With this, let me once again thank all of us. Before we close, let me please appeal to us, because we have passed, we have done confirmations for 2 non-career ambassadors and for PEMCOM. All the heads that we took to do the confirmations would come to naught if we don't pass the votes and proceedings, because that is what will convey our confirmation to the President probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So we'll adjourn and break for about 15 minutes to enable us to go and eat and say our prayers and come back to take the votes and proceedings, and then we adjourn until November. We announce the date. So with that, I want to thank you once again. And there is an announcement. Constitution of Conference Committee on City University of Technology, AUCHI. Senator Ali Mekanadi is yours. The Senate and House of Representatives passed different versions of the above bill. Then the listed members of the conference committee to meet with their House of Reps counterparts to harmonize the bill. Senator Ahmed Babakaita, Chairman. Senator Sandy Ono, Member. Senator Lowell Gumau, Member. Senator Dimka Hezekiah, Member. Senator Tolu Odebi, Member. And Senator Samuel Egu, Member. Distinguished colleagues, we will adjourn for we'll come back at 5, but before then let me put the question for the second reading of the bill. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for legal, governance, regulatory, and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for related matters 2020, SB 510, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide legal, governance, regulatory, and fiscal framework for the Nigerian petroleum industry, the development of host communities, and for related matters 2020, second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Joint Committee on Petroleum Upstream, Petroleum Downstream, and Gas to report back within 8 weeks. Thank you. The Senate is hereby adjourned till 5 p.m. Thank you.